All right, so we are live, Riverside Park in New York City. It's about the quietest place I could find. And we are looking to connect. And I believe my dad is on. So, Dad, look down at the bottom. You should see a little talk bubble or comment bubble. And see if you can touch that and type in. There we go. Great. And now we can add you. And it says that it's adding, so we're hoping that you're coming on soon. And we're connecting.
There we go.
And there we go. We figured out what the problem is. Fantastic.
I have to make a comment. Okay.
Well, so this is a great example of how challenging some of this work can be. It seems like we can share media across all age groups similarly, and it's not the case. I'm sure that my kids can get on faster than I can, and I can get on faster than my dad, but we were able to make it work. So fantastic.
Good.
So we'll go a couple minutes over today, and we'll adjust tomorrow. But I think that's the trigger, is you've got to make a comment, and so now we know how to do it. So I'm live from Riverside Park in Harlem. We're up in New York City today, and had to go with outside because everywhere I went inside was packed with people and very busy and very loud. But even outside, there are still cars on either side of the park. So I'm hidden in as safe a place as I could find. But that's how it's going to be sometimes. We're out and about.
Good.
Yesterday, and I know, Dad, that we're going to talk a little bit about immigration, but I'll lead with one point. Yesterday, if anyone wants to look, we posted pictures and a video of the 9/11 memorial here in Manhattan, and it is tremendous. It is moving, and it is something that we all need to be concerned about. And as we talk about immigration, I hope that we'll talk about both sides of it, both the concerns, but also the welcoming piece. And the difference in those. So at this point, Dad, I'll turn it over to you and see where we go.
Yeah. Well, when we decided that we were going to talk about immigration, it's a very complex issue, and so I wanted to make sure that we were not taking a specific side as from my side, anyhow, because I have a lot of opinions about both sides, meaning that I'm pro-immigration for talent. I'm pro-immigration for everything that is useful and everything like that. I think one of my bigger concerns almost right now, and of course we can talk about the borders, but fact is that an unvetted immigration is not something that's going to be good for either side. I don't believe that immigrants want to come in and just be at the hands of being victims when they get here, and then then it becomes frustrating for them also. And so that challenge to me is really extreme, and especially now it seems to be getting enhanced because of the Venezuelan conflict, because of things that are going on in Mexico and different things. So I guess what we need to talk about, and I think where we were going and talking about immigration, is what your thoughts were regarding the implementation of just programs to take care of immigrants as they come across and get them in. If we bring them in and then we get them vetted, the problem is right now, of course, is the overwhelming amount. Not so much that we can't handle it, it's just an overwhelming amount for the young people and all folks that are down there trying to help. I mean, I don't believe that they're down there trying to hinder people, and hurt people. They're overwhelmed with what they're doing, and so frustration starts to set in. Anyhow, there's about 10 questions in that whole process, so I'll let you go with what you want to talk about.
Sure. So I'll try to tackle them from a couple of different angles. One is to say that this is an extreme. You hit the nail on the head. It's extremely complex, and unfortunately, complex issues are pretty universally not solved by punchline recommendations. And yet, at the same time, as you enter the political sphere, I'm going to go with probably the number one piece of advice I get is always reduce everything to a punchline, even to the point of, I've been told commonly, to just go ahead and lie to people, which I take issue with, but it is commonly recommended, saying people don't understand the complexity of the problem anyway, so there's no point in explaining it. And I think that's a really unfortunate reality and set of recommendations that I've often been given. So I'm not going to follow them. But I will come up with a punchline. And the punchline that comes to mind for me is, desperate people do desperate things. And so immigration at its root is driven by individuals who, for one reason or another, are feeling that wherever they are is so problematic that they need to get somewhere else. And it doesn't matter what obstacle is put in front of them, they're going to fight to try and get there. No wall, no law, no requirement is going to stop somebody if they feel that their child is in danger or that their life is not livable in the location that they are currently. And we can't ignore that. So the problem for our country is that, I like to say, immigration is at the midpoint of humanity and reality, right? From a humanity perspective only, we are a world that is covered by human beings from all different walks of life and all different countries. And at some level, we need to honor that humanity. Where the reality comes in is, whether we like it or not, there are finite resources. And those resources might be land, they might be money, they might be time, they might be jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think where we have a problem in our two parties is they're butting heads on those 2 points, right? Where is the distinction that we need to focus on the humanity part, and where is the distinction when we need to recognize the reality of cost of whatever those resources are? And it becomes, at that point, a very complex issue, because both parties then are trying to say something at the extreme of allow everybody and the other extreme of allow nobody. Where's the line? So I think what you have to do then is separate it into 3 layers, right? The first layer is going to be, how do you deal with the humanity piece of it? And that isn't just recognizing that people are harmed and tortured in some of their current locations. That's when we get into that asylum piece. The other piece of it is, how do we try and empower those folks that maybe are not in that extreme of a scenario, but are concerned for their livelihood? This is when we get into education, empowerment, and support. Because anytime we can help nations to be able to lift themselves up and get out of turmoil, that's stronger for everybody, to your point, Dad. But that is a long-term process, right? And we can't ignore the reality that we are also populating and increasing our population worldwide. That's not just in our nation, that's everywhere. So every country is starting to face this problem. We're hearing a lot about it in the European countries. I heard a lot about it at NATO and Partnership for Peace. And there's a lot of discussion about how open and how closed do you keep borders, again, recognizing this balance of humanity and reality. And so I think we can't ignore the necessity to be looking off-world as well. Again, a very long-term solution, but we do need to be investigating that in our innovation and our research programs. Then you get to that second layer, which is kind of that midterm time frame, right? This is where we get into laws. This is where Congress needs to be clearer about what those laws are. We have folks having sanctuary cities to try and bring people in who have not worked through the system legally. We have the other extreme of children being taken from their parents when the children didn't do anything wrong themselves. I know there are people who take issue with what the parents have done, but that doesn't change the fact that the children did not do anything, and harming them is problematic. Even the government doctors are reporting abuse. So we know really harmful things are happening to these children. How do we balance those extremes? That needs to be that midterm. That's going to be a 3 to 5 year fix, just changing laws and then implementing them. It's pretty tough to do. And then you have the immediate, which is what you're getting to, Dad. But I do think you need all 3 of these layers. So the immediate is, number one, you can't be putting kids into detention centers without parents around. It just goes against everything that this country believes in, and that is crossing that line of humanity. Yes, I understand legally there are times where it is in the best interest of the child to be removed. Obviously, we do that in our own country as well. And under those safety considerations, we have to protect the children, but we shouldn't be causing undue harm to them simply because we can use that. That's not a threat that makes sense for parents. And then two, we have to look at a little more logically where people are coming from. So more immigrants come from Asia than come from Mexico. Even though Mexico gets a lot of discussion, that's not where the majority is coming from. And to your point, Dad, when you talk about, I know that there are people on the border trying to do good work. There are probably people who are, but we can't ignore the fact that there are orders that are coming down, number one, and I know this firsthand because I was involved with some of the folks that were working in this design space. They are being told asylum seekers are a no-go writ large, regardless of their story. That's not entirely making the news, but that is what's being discussed on the inside. There are also ways that we run our contracts. And so when you contract out a company to do this kind of work, you invite a lot of possible problems. So I worked directly with a federal law enforcement training center called FLETC, F-L-E-T-C. And we talked about how long it would take to, one, hire proper border security, two, train them up to be ready to handle this on that border. And we ran the numbers from every which direction. And they said there's no way, even with virtual training, to get people spun up fast enough. So what that means is we're doing rapid hire and reduced training, which means we have people who are not necessarily ready, not because they don't mean well, but because simply the system is not set up to do this at this rapid pace. And what that says to me as a psychologist and as a former government worker, it's a recipe for disaster. You have to move at a pace that we can make change. Because when you don't, you invite this kind of problem. So there are a number of things we have to do. And you didn't bring up sanctuary cities, but that's a question as well. To what extent is that, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I certainly have some, but Dad, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's some of the things that I think from a long-term, short-term, one of the reasons people are leaving where they're at is because it's not in a good situation. I don't think that we work hard enough to improve the conditions outside this country to help these countries become more vibrant and have an economy or a life that people can actually function at a high level or even at a medium level. I think that's the root cause, because if they had a good life, they wouldn't be coming here. I mean, they
right.
would be. And there's a view that if we build up another country, not totally, but I mean, if we build somebody up, they're going to be competition to us, and that's really not true. And actually, it does us harm if we don't help them become successful in life and in their own world. I mean, I think those are old school thoughts that we got to hold this society down in order for us to prosper, and that just got to stop, and we've all got to quit doing that. I mean, and it doesn't matter which country we talk about. It doesn't matter if it's over Indonesia or if it's in Guatemala or wherever. It doesn't matter. We have to start enhancing these people's lives in order for them to want to live in the country of origin, rather than thriving to think this is going to be the end all, be all the end all world they're going to live in. So I think that's a long-term fix. That is not a short-term fix. That is a long-term, but it can help.
It can, and so my pushback, I'm in agreement with you, but I think we should talk about, or my question to you is, why do you think we don't do that as much? What do you think the fear is? Because there are definitely people who are saying we shouldn't do it, and I'm curious what your thought is why we shouldn't do that.
Why we should do it?
Why we should not help other countries do it?
I can see that folks fear competition that they can't they don't know about. I'll just say it from that side. That's number one. Number two, I think that we've crossed some lines in a world now that is so, close. I mean, we're not extreme lines of we have to have power over this all the time or whatever. It's a competitive world, and we have to live within that now. I think it doesn't matter which process took it over from digital to just that, pure transportation. But the fact is, the problem starts to become more of a problem for American businessmen because we put restrictions on how to do business within our own lines. However, the business practices outside of our country and lines don't have to, go along with the same environmental laws that ours have to go by, which I think are good. They don't have to participate in fair trade agreements or anything like that. They can, eliminate it in certain aspects, and those are all very long-term difficult issues that have to be drawn up. And the belief from both the countries that I'm talking about have to also understand that it's good for them to do it the right way. But I don't know if we can get there, and that's where I think the struggle comes. But that origin, if people don't want to stay in the place of origin, they want to come here, then that battle will, then it comes down to what you talk about, the other tiers, because now you have to prepare for it. You have to get
Yeah.
whatever you want to do to absorb this influx of humanity, period. I mean, which
Yeah.
is another very complex issue.
Yeah, so let me give you some good news on that. There are actually a fair number of efforts going on overseas and globally. I apologize. I think I've got an airplane going over me.
Oh, you're okay. I can hear you good.
The realities of New York City, right?
Yeah.
There's always one coming. So there are some efforts in Africa 2030 and also with UNESCO and with some of the other, even NATO and Partnership for Peace, dealing with education worldwide, which we refer to as education for humanity. And I think one of the fears that people have, you may be right, Dad, that there's some competition concerns. I'm not sure that that's universally the biggest concern when it comes to some of the more struggling countries, because they would have to work. I mean, just the amount of time and money they would require to be competitive with our country, I think, is beyond scope. But I do think there's some concern that would cost us a lot, that we don't have the right to try and infiltrate a country in some capacity. And I think there's a big difference between offering to help or creating opportunities for those countries to become more self-sufficient or self-empowering than it is for us to come in and either from a military perspective, destroy and build up and change, or to be able to, or coming in and trying to press our values on others. I think those are very distinct versus opportunity and empowerment options. One of the things that I learned a lot about in my work at the Pentagon is that there is an enormous amount of resources that cost nothing to share. That is something I don't think a lot of people realize. We build things here in the US that are digital, that are accessible, that are easily taken up by other nations that would be helpful to them for building, but would not be competitive to us nor costly to us. And the only thing we have to do is educate and provide access. Those are the target areas that you go to as what we frequently say is low-hanging fruit, right? Because it could make a difference without resource costs to the country. And as we talk about that balance of humanity and reality of resources, this is one of those places where you can make that work. And also, I think the way you deal with the competition piece is getting to a bit more of a global economy, recognizing that every country has something to offer, but they don't all have to overlap, which means it's not so much competition as it is complement.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where you get into this mix of humanitarian efforts, political connection, allied nation efforts, and recognition that immigration is not a single country issue. Much like the environment, it is a world issue. And as some of these countries continue to grow in size, and as our resources continue to deplete, no wall is going to stop any of this. A wall is a short-term, quick punchline that is not going to change anything. Nothing long term for sure. We need better solutions, and they need to be in tiers: long term, midterm, and immediate.
Oh, 100% agree, and that's really the point. I think that, if we don't approach, as you said, and I think right now we're in a crisis, and so we have to have some sort of a short-term way of dealing with it. I think we're not doing very well at it, especially with the amount coming in. And I think, like you said, the training of people and all that to handle these, the influx is very, very difficult. I think for my age group, they see it from one side. I mean, it's a depletion of their hard work of building whatever. It doesn't matter from the PVC pipe that went in for the plumber all the way up to the skyscrapers that go somewhere else that they helped to build. That someone is going to be able to enter the country and take advantage of all that hard work, and it's not going to be Americans doing it, and that bothers them. Now, I'm not saying that I agree 100% that that's the key, but that's really that's a big view of what's going on. And
so that's a great comment, Dad. What is it that people are afraid of? I don't personally feel that kind of fear, because if I've built something and someone can add to it, I think that's exciting. And frankly, I think that is a foundational point. If we go back to the Constitution, you're at a foundational point of this country recognizing the benefit of those diverse ideas, belief systems, experiences, backgrounds, capabilities. And when we become focused on, maintaining everything the same, we lose out on what I would consider foundational. So what do you think people are afraid of?
Well, I guess if it was, we paid as in our own small world, you paid a certain price to educate your children, to do, have the home, to do the things, and we're seeing that being eroded, where for the reason that price being paid by the individuals coming in is not going to be the same, meaning that, they're going to be rewarded with those kinds of things without having to work for it. And that's a very simplistic view, but it's not. It's out there and it's in there, and we don't have a problem with people working for what they get, but we don't want to have everybody get something for nothing that we work very hard to get. And
so how would somebody prove that? How would they prove that they had worked hard enough to earn it?
Well, the fact would be is I own and I'm going to say it from a third party, not from a first party.
Right.
I'll just say, like, well, I worked 2 jobs to earn enough money to buy my house, to take care of my kids, to buy the car, to do make sure they had good health care, blah blah blah, and go down that litany of hard work results and what they did. And when we start saying to people, well, you were disadvantaged, and you came into our country, and now you get the same things that I worked very hard and had to pay for, and you're getting it on my tax dollars that I also had to pay for. It hurts, meaning that we're actually paying them to get the same things that we had to work for, and that's kind of
Are you? I mean, there isn't, the data doesn't support that immigrants are not working. I mean, they're trying to earn a living. They pay taxes. They are working hard. Many, in fact, I believe the numbers, I have to check the exact numbers, but the numbers suggest that, many of them are coming with degrees and capabilities. So is it a fear grounds in,
well, I think
real knowledge, or is it a perception?
Perception. Well, I think here's one of the things that is constantly said, and it's possibly the core value of what we have as far as Americans. Okay, the fact is that the statement also trailers this, is the fact is that, well, we already know that the immigrant will do jobs that we don't want to do. For instance, it's the labor jobs that people will, that the immigrants will do, and versus the, even you're talking about education, but I'm talking about just labor I'm talking about the lawn care business, or the roofing business, or the, janitorial or whatever. It doesn't matter. Those kinds of jobs are not going to, you know, the basic American, person that's been here for 10 generations or whatever, has had family. It's going to the folks that are immigrating, and those are kind of lower paying jobs. They don't have the same, um, status that goes along with whatever else. And so that fear is there. I don't think it's totally realistic that it happens, but you see it. That's the thought.
So you're saying that people are afraid that immigrants are taking low-level jobs that Americans would prefer to work.
No, I think it's almost the other way around, but the fact is those jobs need to be done, but they just fear they're not paying their fair share or something to that degree. It's tough. Am I making
It's
sense?
tough.
Am I making
Well,
sense?
your comment of the fear makes sense, but the reality of it starts to break down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the question
That's where your perception comes in.
And that's the heart and the root of the question we need to tackle. Is it the case that this is really causing a problem, or is it the case that people are afraid it may cause a problem? And I think it's important to distinguish between the two, because if we're getting spun up and we're making big decisions based on fear, we almost universally get ourselves in trouble. We almost universally end up making decisions without wisdom and data, instead based on emotions and perceptions. And we have to be very careful about that. There is a lot to be gained, and there's a lot of data, and there's a lot of reason, not to mention constitutionally. We go all the way back to that foundation core value. Immigration is a foundational concept in this nation. And so to go against it, I think, requires real thought, real data,
Mm-hmm.
and needs to be backed by a alternative plan that isn't based on fear or perception. I think what you're saying is true, that many people are concerned about that. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that all of them are armed with the information needed to be able to make that decision with accuracy. And I would pull that thread just a little bit further to say we're seeing that in every issue, right? We're making decisions about what wars should or should not be fought. You're hearing some of the candidates talk about that. The reality is nobody who isn't at the Secretary of Defense level has all the information at their fingertips, right? There's too much classified to even know. So making suppositions or declarations is very dangerous. We're seeing that at lots and lots of levels on laws, and assuming that we should be making laws for the executive branch, which is not what we do, right? We make programs, but people don't have information about the executive branch to even know what is or isn't happening. And so we get our information from a very small group of people, right? 535 in Congress, and 17, the president, vice president, and 15 cabinet members, and the media. And the first group of people from government totals about 552 people. In the executive branch, we have 2.4 million. And then in defense, we have another 2.1 million. So you're talking 4.5 million people working for the government, and we basically hear from none of them. So how is it that we're armed with enough information to be able to make good decisions? And I think it's tough. I think you have to be somebody like me that actually goes in and gets that data. And that's partly why, that's a huge driver for why I'm doing this.
It's kind of funny, but we live in that fast-paced world, and all we want to do is hear a snippet that everything's okay or it's not okay. It's sort of like the light switch. Does anybody really understand what it takes to make that light switch work? No. No. But all they want to know is that when they walk over to that, light switch, and they turn it up, push it up, the light comes on. What made that? What's behind that? They don't really care. They have no desire, and they are so frustrated. If that light switch doesn't come on, you'd think the world came to an end. So the fact is that, you have to always be cautious of how that, gets worked. And not overwhelm people though with statistics, because they get very bored very quickly. They go to sleep.
Oh,
They don't
sure.
want to listen to it.
Sure.
So the fact is,
Yeah.
is in your case, I think when you start to tool your message clearly, you're going to have to be clear about how that. Don't try to bore people with the statistics, and don't bore them with all the stuff, because that just is not going to. It's not going to flow. It's just.
But I love statistics.
I do too. Okay, so it's not like I wouldn't sit there. I'd probably be interested in taking your talk for 3 days about it. I mean, how long did it take me to tell you to look up world population growth and see the impact and the facts of it, and how fast we were growing, and just in our country that, I talk in silly terms, but every year we grow enough to build a city the size of Houston, Texas, in our country, and that's a lot of people. Okay, and that's just birth rate. That's not including influx. So the fact is, but you and I kind of talk on those issues, but the fact is you have to tool your message, and I think your message is in order to continue where we're going and get us where we need to be with your candidacy. Tool the message, find the right words to say, things can be done, and how, and that they will get fixed by virtue of whatever. And the immigration thing is just a hot topic. It seems to have very small surface tension, but it's a big deal for a lot of people. But it's not the only thing that's facing us. I mean, and you're well aware of that.
No, and that's why I led with a punchline. Right?
Yep.
The punchline is desperate people do desperate things. Our job to actually affect immigration is to reduce that desperation. And so that's why you need different layers: immediate, midterm, long-term. And ultimately that is the goal. So I do think we get it to a punchline. My punchline's though, we're going to focus on the root causes. And that's how we actually make change.
But if you don't, you have to go to the root cause of everything. I mean, most people don't like to do that. They like to take the immediate. It's like, let's paint that. Why?
Right.
Because whatever's underneath, we won't see it anymore.
Well, and to your point, that's why some people like the concept of a wall, because it seems immediate, tangible, and it sounds like it will be effective. Unfortunately, there's no data to support that it would be, certainly not long term. And so that's, of course, that's the pushback, is that doesn't deal with any of the root causes.
No.
And so all issues need to deal with root causes. All issues need to recognize that you have to have understanding of the game rules in government, and all issues need to be considered from a complexity that will actually fix them. And with that, I think we've about hit our mark. But this was good. This was really great. I enjoyed it.
We were still slow in getting on board, but we'll now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a flight to catch.
Go for it.
I have to get on an Uber and keep moving.
All right.
But to come full circle, I do want to just end with, again, encourage people to take a moment to listen to the water at the 9/11 Memorial right here in Manhattan. It is truly moving, and it kind of gets to your core when you see it. So I think it's always a good exercise to take a minute to think about what we lost, and think about how that occurred, and recognize that we need to take a stance and ensure that our borders are safe, and also recognize not everybody is like that. So that balance has to be struck. And it's complex. I wish it were a punchline.
And I'm just going to end with one thing. There's already a whole generation of young people that weren't even born when that happened.
Right.
So anyhow, enjoy your flight.
Thanks, Dad. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Behave and be safe.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.